The call came at 6:47 in the morning, and I remember the exact time because I had just poured my first cup of coffee and was watching the steam rise off it when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. She had been driving home from what she called a supplier conference in Denver. 3 days, she'd said. Back Thursday night, the truck ran a red light on the wet intersection of Highway 36 and Sheridan Boulevard and hit her driver's side door at nearly 60 miles an hour. The paramedics said she likely never felt a thing. They say that to be kind. I've never decided whether I believe them. Her name was Judith. We'd been married for 22 years. I stood in our kitchen in my pajamas for a long time after I hung up. The coffee went cold. I didn't drink it. I didn't move. I just stood there with the phone in my hand and looked at the little dent in the cabinet door that she'd always meant to fix and never did, and I thought, that dent is going to be there forever, now. No one is ever going to fix it. The days that followed were the kind you get through by not thinking too far ahead. 1 hour, then the next. My daughter Rebecca flew in from Seattle. Her husband came with her. My brother Ed drove up from Colorado Springs and sat with me the first 2 nights because he knew I wouldn't ask him to. The neighbors brought food I mostly didn't eat. The funeral home was professional and gentle, and somehow that made everything worse. Judith had been a project manager for a commercial real estate firm downtown. She traveled often, 4, sometimes 5 times a month. Denver, Chicago, Phoenix, occasionally the East Coast. I had long since stopped asking about the details of those trips. Early in our marriage, I'd been curious. I'd ask about the clients, the properties, the meetings. She was always pleasant in her answers, but somehow vague. After a while, I stopped asking. Not because I suspected anything. Honestly, it was just, she had her world and I had mine, and we loved each other in the space between them, and that had always felt like enough. She had told me once, casually, over dinner, that she preferred not to talk shop at home. Work is work, she said. Here is here. I respected that. I thought it was reasonable. I am 61 years old, and I had been married to this woman for more than 2 decades, and I thought I knew what reasonable looked like. 8 days after the accident, a man named Gerald Ashworth called my cell phone and introduced himself as a notary. He said he had some documents related to Judith's estate and asked if he could come by the house. I said, yes, because I thought he meant life insurance paperwork, or maybe the car title. I was not prepared for what he brought. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, dressed in a gray suit that was slightly too big for him, carrying a leather portfolio. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and laid out 3 documents. He explained them in the careful, unhurried way of a man who has delivered unexpected news before and has learned not to rush it. When he was finished, I sat very still and looked at the papers in front of me. Judith had owned a condominium, not a modest 1-bedroom. A full-floor penthouse unit on the 18th floor of a building in the Cherry Creek North neighborhood, one of the most expensive residential areas in Denver. She had purchased it 11 years ago. It was paid off. It was in her name alone, structured through a separate LLC she had set up, and it had never appeared in any of our shared financial disclosures. The property was valued, Mr. Ashworth told me quietly, at just over $2.5 million. He slid a key across the table. A single key on a plain silver ring. It's yours now, he said. I picked it up. It was warm from his pocket. I turned it over in my fingers. Was anyone else listed? I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from a room I wasn't in. No, he said. Just you. After he left, I sat at that kitchen table for 3 hours. Rebecca came in around 5 and found me still sitting there. She asked if I was all right. I told her yes. She looked at me the way children look at parents when they know you're lying but aren't sure they should push. She made dinner. We ate. I didn't tell her about the visit. I didn't tell anyone. For 2 weeks, the key sat in the drawer of my nightstand, under a tube of lip balm and a spare watch battery. Every night I'd open the drawer before bed and look at it, then close the drawer and turn off the light. I told myself I was going to sell the property, obviously. Of course. There was no question. What else would I do with a penthouse in Denver that my wife had hidden from me for over a decade? But I couldn't make myself call a real estate agent. Not yet. I kept thinking, what if there's a reason? What if it's something I can understand? What if I go there and find some piece of it that makes sense? What if I go there and find something I can never come back from? That was the real fear. Not the property. Not the money. The knowing. I drove to Denver on a Thursday morning. It's about an hour from our house in Arvada, depending on traffic. I gave myself every exit ramp on the way there. I could turn around at any point. I kept driving. Cherry Creek North is old money and new construction pressed up against each other, boutique restaurants and real estate offices, and the kind of coffee shops that charge $6 for something you have to explain twice. The building Judith owned a unit in was on a corner lot, maybe 15 stories of glass and brushed steel, with a doorman standing under a navy canopy. I had to show my ID and sign a register. The doorman, a young guy, couldn't have been older than 30, looked at my name and then looked at me and said, "We heard about Mrs. Hartwell. I'm sorry for your loss." I thanked him. I didn't know what else to do. He knew her name. He said it easily, naturally, the way you say the name of someone you've seen walk through a door 100 times. That was the first thing that hit me. Not the building. Not the lobby with its marble floors and the low sound of jazz from somewhere. The fact that this man knew my wife. The elevator had mirrors on 3 sides. I watched myself go up 18 floors. I looked like a man who didn't know where he was going. Which was accurate. The penthouse was unit 1800. There were only 2 units on the top floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in charcoal gray, with recessed lighting that made everything look like a hotel you'd never be able to afford. I stood in front of the door for a moment. My hand was on the key. I could hear my own breathing. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The living room was large. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced east, and the morning light was coming through them in long, flat bars across the hardwood floor. There were bookshelves along one wall, a couch in a deep rust color that I had never seen before, that Judith had chosen without me in a life I hadn't known about. A kitchen to the left, clean, with a few dishes in the drying rack. I stopped moving when I saw the dishes. Someone had been here recently. I stepped in slowly and closed the door behind me. The air smelled faintly of coffee, not old, residual coffee, but recent coffee, the ghost of a pot made in the last day or two. There were 2 mugs on the counter, rinsed but not put away. I walked through the apartment very carefully, the way you move through a space you're not sure is yours. A hallway off the living room led to 2 bedrooms. The first was set up as a study. A desk, a filing cabinet, a laptop closed on the corner of the desk. The second was a full bedroom with a made bed and a small framed photograph on the nightstand. I picked up the photograph. It was Judith. Younger than I remembered, maybe early 40s, standing in front of what looked like the same windows I was looking at now. She was laughing at something off camera, not the careful, composed smile she had for group photos. A real laugh. Her eyes were almost closed with it. She looked happy in a way that went somewhere in my chest like a thumbtack. I sat on the edge of the bed and held the photograph for a long time. Then I heard a key in the front door. I don't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe I had somehow convinced myself I was alone in this and always would be. What I did not expect was the woman who walked in carrying 2 paper grocery bags and a dry cleaning bag over one arm. Mid-50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back, sensible coat, the look of someone with 10 things on her mind. She stopped when she saw me. The grocery bag stayed in her arms. We stared at each other across the living room. "You must be Martin," she said. My name is not a question she should have known the answer to. I had not introduced myself. I had not been here before. My name was not listed anywhere in this building. "How do you know my name?" I said. She set the groceries down on the kitchen counter, slowly, like she was deciding something. "Because Judith talked about you," she said. "A lot, actually." Her name was Carolyn. She had worked for a nonprofit that Judith quietly funded for 9 years, a transitional housing organization for women leaving domestic violence situations. Judith hadn't just written checks. She had been operationally involved. She came to Denver to work. The Sumpor conferences, the client meetings, those had been real work, just not the work she'd told me about. She'd helped house over 400 women in that time. She'd sat in intake interviews. She'd helped to negotiate leases. She'd sometimes stayed for a week at a stretch when they were in the middle of a difficult case. The Penthouse was the operational headquarters, and Carolyn's secondary office. And, for a few women a year who needed a safe place on short notice, that didn't show up in a shelter database, a temporary refuge. I sat on that rust-colored couch while Carolyn made coffee I didn't ask for and told me things about my wife that I had not known and could not have guessed. Judith had grown up watching her mother stay in a marriage that hurt her. She had never told me that, not directly, not in 22 years. She had told Carolyn. She had channeled it into this. She hadn't told me because she thought I'd feel replaced. That was the word Carolyn used. She'd thought I would feel like she was filling a need with strangers that she should have filled with me. So she kept it. She kept it so long it became a separate life, and a separate life became a secret, and a secret became a weight she'd carried alone because she didn't know how to put it down without breaking something. She was going to tell you, Carolyn said. She talked about it at the last time I saw her. She said she was tired of the distance. She said you deserved to know. She had been driving home from Denver when the truck ran the red light. I stayed in that apartment for most of the afternoon. Carolyn gave me time alone in the study. I opened the filing cabinet. There were 11 years of records in there, neat, labeled, documented. 417 women helped in some form. Some just one night, some for months of stabilization. Judith's name was in every one of those files in some capacity. I drove home in the dark. I didn't turn the radio on. I just drove. Rebecca was at the house when I got back. She'd made soup. She asked where I'd been and I said Denver. She looked at me waiting for more, and I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where the notary had sat 2 weeks ago. And I told her everything. She cried before I finished the first part. We sat there for 2 hours. At some point, the soup got cold and neither of us touched it. Rebecca said, "How do you feel?" And I had to actually think about that before I could answer, because I wanted to give her a real answer and not just a sound. "I feel like I didn't know her as well as I thought," I said. "And I feel like maybe I knew her exactly right." That's not a contradiction. I've had time to understand that now. I didn't sell the penthouse. I couldn't. I thought about it seriously. Talked to an attorney, talked to a financial advisor, ran the numbers, all of it. In the end, what I did was transfer the deed to the nonprofit directly. Put it in their name, made it official. Carolyn cried when I called to tell her. I didn't expect that. I think I maybe cried a little too, though I'd deny that under oath. That was 2 years ago now. The organization still operates out of that apartment. They've helped another 137 women since Judith died. There's a small framed photo in the entryway now, just inside the front door. That same photo I found on the nightstand, that first day, the one of Judith laughing in front of the windows. They put it there. Nobody asked me. When I went back for the first time after the transfer, I walked in and saw it, and had to stand there for a minute before I could speak. The dent in the cabinet door is still there. I haven't fixed it. I don't plan to. Some things you leave exactly where they are because the absence of something isn't always an emptiness. Sometimes it's the shape of what was there. Judith knew that. She just couldn't find the words for it while she was alive. She found a different way to say it. It's enough.